I stood in the kitchen of Romano's, the restaurant I had run for 11 years, holding a letter from my parents, announcing my younger brother Dylan as the new CEO. The ink was still fresh. My hands shook as I read the words praising Dylan's business degree, while dismissing my decade of 70-hour weeks, saved recipes, and cultivated relationships. I looked at my chef's knives on the counter. I thought of the $800,000 catering contract with Hartfield Corporation I just secured last month. Then I started packing. I remember the first day I walked into Romano's kitchen. I was 21 years old, fresh out of culinary school, and my father, Marco, handed me an apron like he was passing down a sacred relic. That was 11 years ago. 11 years of waking up at 5 in the morning to meet suppliers at the back door. 11 years of perfecting my grandfather's marinara recipe until it made grown men cry with nostalgia. 11 years of turning a struggling Italian-American restaurant in our small Connecticut town into something people drove 2 hours to experience. My parents bought Romano's 30 years ago, when they were newlyweds with more dreams than money. My father worked the front of house while my mother managed the books. They survived, barely, serving decent food to loyal locals who came more out of habit than excitement. When I finished culinary school, they were ready to sell. The restaurant was breaking even at best, and they were exhausted. I begged them to give me 1 year, just 12 months to prove I could turn things around. I rebuilt the menu from scratch, combining traditional Italian techniques with modern American tastes. I trained the kitchen staff personally, spending hours teaching them the difference between good food and unforgettable food. I created signature dishes that people started talking about on social media before social media was even a big thing in the restaurant world. Within 2 years, we went from 50 customers on a good night to turning away walk-ins every weekend. Within 5 years, we were the most successful restaurant in town. Within 8 years, food critics from New York were making the trip to review us. I did that. Not my business degree. Not some consultant. Me, with my hands in dough at 3 in the morning, and my mind constantly creating new ways to make people fall in love with food. 3 days ago, everything changed. Dylan came home. My younger brother, 28 years old, who spent the last 6 years getting his MBA at some prestigious university I could never afford to attend. He never worked a single day in a restaurant. He couldn't tell you the difference between a sauté pan and a stock pot. But he had that degree, and apparently that was all that mattered to my parents. They called a family meeting after closing time. I showed up tired, covered in flour, smelling like garlic and rosemary. Dylan showed up in a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. My mother Patricia sat at the corner table where she always did the books. My father Marco stood by the bar, unable to meet my eyes. That should have been my first warning. My mother cleared her throat. She said they had an exciting announcement about the future of Romano's. They said the restaurant had reached a point where it needed fresh leadership to grow to the next level. They said Dylan, with his business education and modern vision, would be taking over as CEO. I would remain as head chef. I sat there, frozen, as they explained their reasoning. Dylan had the business acumen they needed. Dylan understood marketing, expansion strategies, investment opportunities. Dylan had connections in the business world. Dylan, Dylan, Dylan. They kept saying his name like it was magic, like it could somehow erase everything I had built. I tried to argue. I reminded them that I had spent 11 years learning every aspect of this business. I knew the suppliers personally, negotiated better prices because they trusted me. I knew which tables to seat the difficult customers at, which servers could handle the high-maintenance ones. I knew that the walk-in freezer made a weird noise on Wednesdays that meant nothing but sounded like it was dying. I knew everything, because I lived it every single day. My mother cut me off. She said I was being emotional. She said this was a business decision, not a personal one. She said Dylan brought fresh perspective, something we needed to compete in today's market. My father finally spoke. He said I would still run the kitchen, that I was still valuable, that this was what I was good at, like I was some kind of line cook they were keeping around out of pity. I walked out of that meeting and went home to my apartment. I did not sleep for 3 days. I kept thinking about the Hartfield Corporation contract, $800,000 over 2 years. I spent 6 months building that relationship with their VP of Operations, Helen Bradshaw. 6 months of custom tasting menus, of late-night phone calls discussing dietary restrictions for their executives, of personally delivering sample dishes to their corporate office. That contract was not just about money. It was about my reputation, my relationships, my commitment to excellence. Helen Bradshaw did not choose Romano's because of our business structure or our marketing plan. She chose us because of me. Because I sat with her for 3 hours discussing her vision for sophisticated corporate dining. Because I created a custom menu that impressed her CEO so much, he extended the contract from 1 year to 2. Because I personally guaranteed that every single event would meet the highest standards. That contract had my name all over it, literally. The paperwork specified that I would be the executive chef responsible for all Hartfield events. On the 3rd day of not sleeping, I made my decision. I walked into my parents' office above the restaurant. Dylan was already there, feet up on the desk that used to be covered in my menu planning notebooks. He was looking at spreadsheets, probably trying to figure out what all the numbers meant. He saw me and smirked. He actually smirked at me. He said my dad wanted me to train him on the Hartfield account. He said he would be taking over client relations, that it was time to professionalize our approach. He used that word, professionalize, like what I had been doing for 6 months was amateur hour. Something inside me snapped, not in an angry way, in a clear, calm, absolutely certain way. I said, I quit. Effective immediately. The smirk fell off Dylan's face. My parents came running from downstairs. They had heard the commotion. My mother looked panicked. My father looked angry. They both started talking at once, asking what I meant, telling me not to be rash, saying we could discuss this like adults. I told them there was nothing to discuss. They made their choice when they gave Dylan the CEO position. I told them the Hartfield contract was built on personal relationships that Dylan could not replicate. I told them Helen Bradshaw chose me, not Romano's, and without me, that contract was worthless. My father dismissed this immediately. He said I was being dramatic. He said contracts are contracts, that Dylan would handle it fine, that I was underestimating my brother. I went downstairs to the kitchen. My kitchen. I packed my knives, the expensive Japanese ones I had saved for months to buy. I packed my recipe notebooks, the ones with my handwriting filling every page. I packed my chef's coat, the one with my name embroidered on it. I left my keys on the counter next to the stove I had cooked at for 11 years. I walked toward my car. My mother ran after me. She was crying, begging me to reconsider. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said I was being selfish. I stopped and turned to look at her. I said, "You made your choice. Now, live with it." Then I drove away. I checked into a hotel that first night. Nothing fancy, just a basic place off the highway with clean sheets and terrible coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned off my phone. I knew they would call. I was right. When I finally turned it back on the next morning, I had 47 missed calls. 32 from my mother, 10 from my father, 5 from Dylan. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to them. The first person I actually spoke to was my younger sister, Emma. She was 26, taught 3rd grade at the elementary school 2 towns over. She had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who smoothed over arguments and reminded everyone that we were supposed to love each other. She called me on the 2nd day, and I answered because I knew she would just keep trying. She was crying before she even said hello. She asked me what I had done, why I was doing this to everyone. Did I not care about the family at all? I tried to explain my side. I told her about 11 years of work, about being passed over for someone with no experience, about being told I was just good for the kitchen. She listened, but I could tell she did not really hear me. She said I was being selfish. She said I should think about the family business, about Mom and Dad's legacy, about how Dylan was just trying to help. I realized then that Emma saw it the same way our parents did. Dylan was the golden child with the fancy degree. I was just the cook. I told her I loved her, but I could not talk about this anymore. She hung up on me. Day 3 was when things got interesting. Helen Bradshaw called my personal cell phone. I had given it to her months ago for emergencies, for last-minute menu changes or schedule conflicts. I almost did not answer. Part of me wanted to just disappear, start over somewhere new, forget Romano's ever existed. But I respected Helen too much to ghost her. She got straight to the point. She said Dylan had contacted her, introduced himself as the new CEO of Romano's. She said he tried to assure her that nothing would change with their contract, that the quality and service would remain exactly the same. Her voice had that careful, professional tone people use when they are confused but trying to be polite. She asked me directly, "Elliot, are you still going to be handling our account? Are you still the executive chef responsible for our events?" I could have lied. I could have said yes, smoothed things over, maybe worked out some arrangement with my parents where I stayed involved just for the Hartfield contract. But I was done lying, done pretending, done making sacrifices for people who did not value them. I said, "No, Helen. I am no longer with Romano's. I quit 3 days ago." There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said she needed to discuss this further with her team and with my family. She thanked me for my honesty and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, knowing I had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would blow up my parents' business. 2 days later, on day 5, my parents showed up at my hotel. I was sitting in the depressing little breakfast area, eating rubbery scrambled eggs and drinking the terrible coffee, when they walked in. My mother looked like she had not slept since I left. My father looked 10 years older. Neither of them looked angry anymore. They looked terrified. My father sat down across from me without asking. My mother stood behind him, twisting her hands together. He said Helen Bradshaw had scheduled an emergency meeting. She was invoking some clause in the contract about key personnel. The contract apparently specified that I, Elliot Romano, would be the executive chef responsible for all Hartfield Corporation events. Without me, Hartfield had the right to terminate the contract immediately without any penalty. I knew about that clause. I had insisted on it, not because I thought I would ever leave, but because Helen wanted assurance that the person she had spent 6 months building a relationship with would actually be the one delivering the service. It was standard practice in high-end corporate catering. Key personnel clauses protected the client from bait-and-switch situations. My father asked. No, he begged me to just come back for the meeting, just smooth things over with Helen. He said we could discuss new arrangements afterward. He said they were willing to reconsider the CEO situation. My mother jumped in, saying they had been too hasty, that they should have talked to me first, that they valued everything I had done. I looked at them both. I asked the only question that mattered. What about Dylan being CEO? Is that changing? My father hesitated. My mother looked away. That told me everything I needed to know. They wanted me to save the contract, but they were not actually willing to change anything else. They wanted me to be a good son, swallow my pride, protect the family business, and then go back to my reduced role in the kitchen. I thought about saying no. I thought about just walking away and letting them deal with the consequences of their choices. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being 21 and believing my parents and I were partners in building something special, made me agree. I said I would attend the meeting. Not as an employee, as a consultant, as a favor. One time only. The meeting was scheduled for the next afternoon at Romano's. Helen Bradshaw arrived exactly on time, professional as always in a navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio. She shook hands with everyone, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. My parents looked nervous. Dylan looked defensive. I felt nothing, just a strange sense of calm. Helen sat at the head of the table and opened her portfolio. She got straight to business. She said when she signed the contract with Romanos, she did so based on specific criteria. The quality of the food, yes, but more importantly, the quality of the relationship she had built with me. She said corporate clients like Hartfield needed reliability, consistency, and personal attention. She had spent months evaluating different restaurants before choosing Romanos, and the deciding factor had been me. Dylan tried to jump in. He said he understood her concerns, but assured her he could maintain the same level of quality and service. He had reviewed all the contracts, he said. He understood the scope of work. He had plans to actually improve efficiency and potentially reduce costs while maintaining quality. That last part made Helen's eyebrow raise slightly. She turned to him with a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. She asked him about his culinary background. He admitted he had none. She asked him about his experience in high-end catering. He said he had managed several business projects in school. She asked him if he understood the specific dietary requirements of Hartfield's CEO, who had severe allergies and very particular tastes. Dylan glanced at the paperwork, clearly having no idea. Then Helen turned to me. "Elliot," she said, "will you be personally involved in fulfilling this contract? Will you be the executive chef handling our events?" I looked at my parents. My mother's eyes were pleading. My father's jaw was tight. Dylan was staring at me with barely concealed anger. I thought about the easy thing to do, the family thing to do. Then I thought about the text message Dylan had sent me the day after I quit, the one where he called me a jealous loser who could not handle not being the favorite anymore. I said, "No, Helen. I will not be involved. Talk to your CEO." Helen closed her portfolio. She said that based on the key personnel clause in their contract and the material change in Romano's operational structure, Hartfield Corporation was exercising its right to terminate the agreement effective immediately. $800,000. Gone. Just like that. She stood up, shook my hand, thanked me for my honesty, and walked out. The room exploded. My mother started crying. My father slammed his hand on the table. Dylan started yelling at me, calling me a saboteur, saying I had just destroyed the family business out of spite. I stood up, looked at all of them, and walked out. I heard my mother calling after me, but I did not turn around. I got in my car and drove back to my hotel. I felt vindicated. I also felt guilty. I also felt free. I felt everything and nothing all at once. The news spread fast. Small-town Connecticut has a way of making everyone's business public knowledge by lunchtime. By the end of that week, everyone in our town knew that Romanos had lost a massive contract and that I had quit. The story got twisted in the telling, the way stories always do. Some people said I was the hero standing up for myself. Others said I was the villain who destroyed my own family out of pride. Romano's reputation took an immediate hit. It was not just about the money from the Hartfield contract, though that was bad enough. It was about what the loss signaled to other clients. If a major corporation like Hartfield terminated their contract, what did that say about Romano's stability? What did that say about their ability to deliver? 2 weeks after the Hartfield situation, my parents lost another contract. This one was smaller, only $60,000. But it was with a local corporate park that held quarterly events. The client said they were consolidating their vendors. Everyone knew the real reason. They did not want to be the next Hartfield, locked into a contract with a restaurant going through internal chaos. My family blamed me. All of it. Every lost customer, every bad review, every anxious supplier. According to them, I was the one who had destroyed everything by being selfish and vengeful. Never mind that they had created the situation by handing control to someone with no experience. Never mind that Dylan was now making decisions about a business he did not understand. None of that mattered. I was the traitor who had walked away. Dylan launched a full-scale retaliation campaign. He started calling people in the industry, other restaurant owners, suppliers we had worked with for years. He told them I had sabotaged the family business. He said I had stolen recipes and client lists. He even started a rumor that I had been embezzling money from Romanos for years. It was completely fabricated, obviously, but mud sticks. Even when people do not believe the accusation, they remember the association. I started getting strange reactions when I reached out to my professional contacts. People I had known for years suddenly were not returning my calls. Suppliers I had bought from for a decade suddenly had scheduling conflicts when I asked to meet. I heard through the grapevine that Dylan had been calling ahead, poisoning every opportunity before I even had a chance. One afternoon, I ran into a chef I had mentored years ago. Tommy Chen had worked at Romano's when he was just starting out, and I had taught him everything I knew about Italian cuisine. He had his own place now, a successful Asian fusion restaurant in the next town over. We ran into each other at a supplier's warehouse. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me. I asked him how he was doing. He said fine, busy, the usual. Then he hesitated. He asked if it was true that I had left Romano's because I got caught taking money. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I explained what had actually happened. I told him about Dylan becoming CEO, about me quitting, about the Hartfield contract. He listened, nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Dylan had gotten to him first. My sister Emma stopped speaking to me entirely. She blocked my number. I heard from a cousin that Emma was telling people I had always been jealous of Dylan, that I could not handle him succeeding where I had plateaued. It hurt more than I expected. Emma and I had been close growing up. She used to come to Romano's after school and do her homework at the corner table while I worked. I taught her how to make pasta from scratch when she was 12. Now she would not even acknowledge my existence. My extended family took sides, and most of them chose my parents. At a family christening for a cousin's baby, I showed up to pay my respects. The room went quiet when I walked in. People whispered. My Uncle Frank, my father's brother, actually asked me to leave. He said my presence was upsetting my parents, and that I should have the decency to stay away. I left without arguing. What was the point? I burned through my savings faster than I expected. The hotel was eating up money. I needed to find work, but my reputation in the area was shot. I applied to several restaurants as an executive chef. I had the credentials, the experience, the proven track record. I should have had my pick of positions. Instead, I got polite rejection emails or no response at all. Finally, I figured out why. I got a rare, honest conversation with a restaurant owner I had known casually for years. He told me straight out that Dylan had called him. Dylan said I was unreliable, that I abandoned my family's business without notice, that I was involved in some kind of financial impropriety. The owner said he could not risk hiring someone with that kind of baggage, even if he suspected Dylan was lying. It was just not worth the potential drama. I was furious. Dylan was not just trying to defend himself or the restaurant. He was actively trying to destroy my career, to make sure I could not succeed anywhere. It was vindictive, in a way I had not thought my younger brother was capable of. I always knew he was spoiled and arrogant, but this was different. This was calculated cruelty. I moved out of the hotel and into a cheap studio apartment in a rough neighborhood. It was all I could afford. The building smelled like mildew, and the couple upstairs fought every single night. But it had a roof and a bathroom, and that was all I could manage. I took a job as a line cook at a chain restaurant, $14 an hour. I had not made that kind of money since I was 22. It was humiliating. I went from running one of the best restaurants in Connecticut to flipping burgers and following recipes created by some corporate committee. My coworkers were mostly kids in their early 20s saving up for college. They were nice enough, but they had no idea who I was or what I had done. To them, I was just another older guy who probably messed up his life somehow and ended up working at a place where nobody asked questions. One night, about 2 months after I left Romano's, I sat in my studio apartment eating ramen noodles and staring at my chef's knives gathering dust on the counter. I had not cooked real food in weeks. I had no kitchen worth using, no ingredients worth cooking, and no energy to try. I felt like a complete failure. Everything I had built was gone. My family hated me. My reputation was destroyed. I was 32 years old, starting over from nothing. Then my phone rang. It was my father. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. He did not say hello. He just started talking. He said Romano's was in trouble. Dylan had hired a new chef to replace me, but the guy quit after 2 weeks. He could not handle the pressure, could not recreate the dishes customers expected, did not understand the systems I had built. Food quality had plummeted. Reviews were brutal. People were posting pictures of mediocre food on social media, comparing it to what they remembered from when I was there. My father said they needed me. He said they had made a mistake. He said they were willing to offer me a full partnership. 33% ownership of Romano's. Equal say with Dylan in all major decisions. A salary twice what I had been making. He said I could even have the CEO title if that was what I needed. He begged me to come back. I listened without saying anything. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Part of me wanted to go back to the place I had called home for 11 years, to get back into a real kitchen, to do the work I was born to do. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 months being destroyed by my own family, asked one question. I asked him if Dylan was involved in this offer. Was Dylan okay with giving me 33% ownership and equal decision-making power? There was a long pause. My father said Dylan was adjusting to the situation, that he would come around, that what mattered was saving the restaurant. That pause told me everything I needed to know. Dylan had no idea about this offer. My father was trying to fix things behind Dylan's back, which meant the partnership offer would fall apart the second Dylan found out about it. I was about to turn him down when my phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number I did not recognize. The message said, "Thought you should know. Dylan is meeting with investors tomorrow to sell Romano's. Your dad doesn't know." There was a photo attached. It was Dylan sitting in a coffee shop with 2 men in business suits, documents spread across the table. I asked my father if he knew Dylan was trying to sell the restaurant. He said, "What?" I told him about the text and the photo. He said that was impossible. Dylan would never do that without discussing it with them first. I said I would forward him the photo and he should ask Dylan directly. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my father called back. His voice was shaking. He said he had confronted Dylan. Dylan admitted it. He had been in talks with a restaurant group for 3 weeks. He planned to sell Romano's, take his cut, and use the money to start his own business consulting company. The sale would leave my parents with almost nothing after debts and legal fees. Dylan never cared about the restaurant. He just wanted the CEO title on his resume and a quick flip for profit. My father asked me again to come back. He said they would stop the sale. They would fix everything. They would make Dylan step down. I asked him why I should believe anything would change. Why should I think they would not just side with Dylan again the moment things got difficult? He could not answer that. He said he was sorry. He said they had failed me. Then he hung up. I sat there holding my phone, thinking about how close I had come to going back. If that anonymous text had not come through, I might have actually returned to Romano's and walked right into another trap. I never found out who sent me that message, but I owed them everything. They saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I realized something that night. My family was never going to change. They were never going to see me as anything more than the dependable workhorse who would always come back no matter how badly they treated me. Dylan would always be the golden child. I would always be the one expected to sacrifice. If I went back, even with a partnership agreement, they would find a way to diminish me again. So I made a decision. I would not go back. Not ever. Not even if Romano's closed. Not even if my parents lost everything. They made their choice. They chose Dylan over me, repeatedly, even after seeing what he really was. Now they could live with the consequences. I was done being the safety net for people who set me on fire. The next 2 months were the hardest of my life. I worked double shifts at the chain restaurant, saving every penny I could. I came home exhausted, smelling like fryer grease, and fell into bed in my depressing studio apartment. I stopped checking social media, because all I saw were posts about Romano's declining quality and my former colleagues struggling under Dylan's mismanagement. It hurt too much to watch something I built crumble from a distance. I was working a particularly brutal Saturday night shift when my phone rang during my break. I was sitting in the back alley, eating a staff meal that tasted like cardboard when I saw the name on the screen. Helen Bradshaw. I had not spoken to her since the contract termination meeting. I figured she had written off Romano's entirely and moved on to another vendor. I answered anyway. She asked me how I was doing. I gave her the sanitized version, said I was exploring new opportunities, keeping busy. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she had been following what happened with Romano's. She knew about the declining quality, the internal family drama, Dylan's attempted sale. Apparently, the business community in Connecticut was smaller than I realized, and news traveled fast. She told me she had been thinking about our situation a lot. She said Hartfield Corporation had ended up hiring a different catering company for their events, but the quality was not the same. The food was fine, competent, but it lacked the creativity and personal touch I had brought. Her CEO had mentioned it twice. That was significant, because her CEO never mentioned anything unless he was genuinely disappointed. Then she said something that changed everything. She said she wanted to offer me a private opportunity. Hartfield's CEO, Richard Hartfield himself, was hosting a small, intimate dinner at his home for 6 major investors. It was a critical meeting about a potential merger. He wanted exceptional food, something that would impress people who ate at the best restaurants in New York and Paris regularly. Helen had suggested me. Richard remembered my tasting menu from months ago and agreed. The job would pay $25,000 for one evening. But it was more than just money. It was a test. If I could pull this off, if I could deliver high-quality fine dining completely independently without a restaurant behind me, it could open doors. Helen said it straight out. Richard was looking for investment opportunities. If he was impressed enough, he might want to talk about something bigger. I sat in that alley behind a chain restaurant, smelling like French fry oil, and tried to process what she was saying. She was offering me a chance to prove myself at the highest level. But I had no restaurant, no kitchen, no team. I had nothing but my knives and my skills. I told her I would need to rent a commercial kitchen. I would need to buy premium ingredients. I would be working alone. She said she understood. She asked if I could do it. I said yes before I had any idea how I would actually make it happen. I had $2,000 in my bank account. It was every penny I had saved from 2 months of grueling work. I used $1,500 of it to rent a commercial kitchen for 24 hours. It was a shared space that local caterers and food truck operators used, nothing fancy, but it was clean and had professional equipment. I used the remaining $500 for ingredients. I called in favors from suppliers who still believed in me, who remembered when I actually paid my bills on time and treated them with respect. I designed an 8-course tasting menu that showcased everything I was capable of. I started with a hamachi crudo with citrus and fennel, light and bright to open the palate. Then a sweet corn soup with crab and basil oil, pan-seared scallops with cauliflower puree and pancetta, house-made pasta with wild mushrooms and truffle, herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables, a palate cleanser of lemon sorbet with Prosecco, a cheese course with fruit compote and house-made crackers, and finally, a chocolate soufflé with vanilla bean ice cream. I had 18 hours to prep everything. I worked alone. No sous chef, no line cooks, no dishwasher, just me and the ingredients and the skills I had spent 15 years developing. I butchered the lamb myself. I made the pasta from scratch. I cleaned 30 pounds of vegetables. I made ice cream and sorbet. I baked bread. My hands cramped. My back ached. I cut my finger and wrapped it in a paper towel and kept working. I had not felt this alive in months. The dinner was at Richard Hartfield's estate in the wealthy part of town. Not mansion wealthy, but old money comfortable wealthy. The kind of house with a chef's kitchen that probably got used twice a year. Helen met me at the service entrance and helped me carry everything in. She looked at the amount of food and equipment I had brought and raised an eyebrow. I told her I did not believe in half measures. I set up in the kitchen while the guests arrived. I could hear them in the dining room, talking about markets and mergers and things I did not understand. I focused on timing. 8 courses for 7 people meant 56 plates that all needed to be perfect and properly paced. I had done this 1,000 times at Romano's, but never alone, never with this much riding on it. The first course went out. I waited, listening. I heard the conversation pause. Then I heard someone say, "Wow, that was a good sign." The second course went out. More pauses in conversation. People do not stop talking at business dinners unless the food is actually worth paying attention to. By the 4th course, Helen came into the kitchen. She was smiling. She said Richard wanted to meet me after dinner. I finished the remaining courses. The soufflés were perfect, rising exactly as they should, the centers still molten. I plated them with the ice cream and sent them out. Then I started cleaning up. I was scrubbing a pan when Helen came back with Richard Hartfield himself. Richard was in his late 50s, silver hair, expensive casual clothes, the kind of man who was so wealthy he did not need to prove it. He shook my hand and thanked me for an exceptional meal. He said his guests had been impressed, which was rare. Then he asked if I had a few minutes to talk. We sat in his kitchen while I was still wearing my chef's coat, smelling like lamb and chocolate. He asked me about my background. I told him about Romano's, about building it up, about walking away. He asked why I left. I gave him the honest version. I said I spent 11 years creating something excellent, and my family gave control to someone with no experience or passion for the work. I said I realized I would rather start over from nothing than watch what I built get destroyed from the inside. Richard nodded. He said he understood. He had started his own company 30 years ago after leaving a family business where he was never appreciated. He asked what my plans were. I admitted I did not really have any beyond surviving, and maybe rebuilding my reputation enough to get a decent job somewhere. He asked if I had ever thought about opening my own restaurant. I laughed. I said I had $2,000 to my name before tonight's job. Opening a restaurant required hundreds of thousands in capital, licenses, location scouting, equipment, staff. It was impossible. Richard smiled. He said, what if capital was not the limiting factor? What if someone was willing to invest in me, in my vision, in what I could create if I had complete control? He told me Hartfield Corporation had a venture capital division that invested in promising businesses. He said they had been looking at the hospitality industry, specifically upscale dining. He said, based on tonight's dinner and Helen's recommendation, he wanted to offer me something. $300,000 in startup capital. I would own 50% of the restaurant. Hartfield would own the other 50%, but I would have complete creative control. They would be silent partners focused only on the business side. I sat there in his kitchen, exhausted and covered in food stains, trying to process what he was saying. He was offering me my own restaurant. Everything I had dreamed about, but there was a catch. There was always a catch. He said they wanted to move fast. They wanted the restaurant open in 4 months. Location scouting, build-out, hiring, menu development, licensing, everything done in 16 weeks. It was an insane timeline. I asked why the rush. He said the market was right, the timing was perfect, and honestly, they wanted to see if I could handle the pressure. Opening a restaurant in 4 months was a test. If I could pull it off, it would prove I had the skills and temperament to run a successful business long-term. If I failed, well, they would cut their losses. I had never opened a restaurant from scratch. I had taken over Romano's when it was already established. I had improved it, transformed it, but the foundation was already there. This would be starting from absolutely nothing. Finding a location in a competitive market, designing the space, dealing with contractors and inspectors, building a menu, hiring an entire staff, creating an identity, all while probably sleeping 3 hours a night and living on coffee and anxiety. I looked at Richard Hartfield. I looked at Helen Bradshaw standing in the doorway. I thought about my studio apartment and my job at the chain restaurant and my family who had given up on me. I thought about Dylan sitting in Romano's office with his feet up on the desk. I thought about proving every single person wrong. I said yes. The next 4 months were a blur of 18-hour days and impossible decisions. I named the restaurant Ember. It felt right. Something that rises from ashes, that starts small and grows into something bright and consuming. Helen helped me find a location. It was in the same town as Romano's, just 3 blocks away. When I signed the lease, I knew exactly what message that sent to my family. I was not running away. I was competing directly. The space had been a failed gastropub, so it had the basics of a commercial kitchen, but everything needed to be updated. I hired contractors and stood over them every single day, making sure every detail was right. I designed the dining room myself, going for warm and modern, intimate without being cramped. I wanted people to feel like they were being invited into something special, not just eating at another restaurant. I worked on the menu in every spare moment. I wanted it to be sophisticated but not pretentious. Seasonal, local ingredients prepared with technique and creativity. I built relationships with new suppliers, farmers who grew incredible produce, a butcher who sourced heritage breed pork, a fisherman who brought in dayboat catches. Every ingredient mattered. Word spread fast. People knew I was opening a restaurant. Some of my former colleagues from Romano's reached out. They were unhappy under Dylan's leadership. He had no idea how to run a kitchen, constantly making changes that made no sense, undermining their authority in front of staff. 3 of my best people asked if I had positions available. I hired them immediately. I hired carefully beyond that. I interviewed dozens of people for every position. I was not just looking for skills. I was looking for people who cared, who wanted to be part of something excellent, who understood that a restaurant is only as good as its weakest link. I built a team of 15 people who were hungry and talented and willing to work hard. Helen Bradshaw committed to a new contract with Ember, $1 million over 3 years. It was more than the Romano's contract had been. She said Hartfield Corporation was betting on me, and they wanted everyone to know it. The announcement was made in the local business journal. I knew my family would see it. 3 months into construction and planning, Dylan found out about Ember. I knew the moment he knew because my phone exploded with angry text messages. He called me every name he could think of. He said I was pathetic, trying to compete with the family restaurant. He said I would fail. He said opening a restaurant 3 blocks from Romano's was a declaration of war. I did not respond to any of his messages. I just kept working. Romano's was dying. I heard about it through the industry grapevine. They had lost 60% of their business since I left. Dylan had driven away most of the experienced staff. He had changed the menu to cut costs, replacing quality ingredients with cheaper alternatives. He had eliminated signature dishes that took too much time to prepare. The restaurant that had once had a 3-week wait for Saturday night reservations was now half empty most nights. Dylan tried to save it. He lowered prices. He ran Groupon deals. He hired a marketing consultant who created a social media campaign that felt desperate and off-brand. Nothing worked. The problem was not the marketing or the prices. The problem was that the food was mediocre, and everyone knew it. Then Dylan escalated. He filed a lawsuit against me. He claimed I had stolen Romano's recipes and client lists. He claimed I had breached a non-compete agreement that did not actually exist. He claimed I was intentionally sabotaging Romano's by opening a competing restaurant. It was frivolous and ridiculous, but it cost me money. I did not have to hire an attorney. My lawyer looked over the complaint and said it was baseless. There was no non-compete agreement. The recipes were mine, developed by me, and I had every right to use them. Opening a competing business was legal. She said we could get it dismissed easily, but it would still take time and create negative publicity. Dylan was not trying to win the lawsuit. He was trying to damage me. The lawsuit made the local news. The headline was, "Family Restaurant Drama. Brother Sues. Brother over New Venture." It made both of us look bad, but it made Dylan look worse. The article included quotes from former Romano's customers talking about how quality had declined. It mentioned that I had built Romano's into a success before my family pushed me out. Public opinion was on my side, but the whole thing was exhausting and distracting. Dylan did not stop there. He contacted the health department with anonymous complaints about Ember's Kitchen. Inspectors showed up twice in 1 week, clearly annoyed at being sent on wild goose chases. They found nothing wrong because there was nothing wrong. I ran a spotless operation. The lead inspector apologized and said someone was obviously wasting everyone's time. Dylan tried to poach my staff. He offered my sous chef double what I was paying to come back to Romano's. He offered my best line cook a management position. He called everyone I had hired and tried to lure them away. None of them took his offers. They had worked for Dylan, and they knew what that was like. They trusted me. He spread rumors. He told suppliers that Ember was financed by dirty money. He told other restaurant owners that I was unstable and vindictive. He told anyone who would listen that my success was only because I had stolen everything from Romano's. Most people did not believe him, but some did. Doubt is a powerful weapon. 4 weeks before Ember's opening, my parents finally saw what Dylan was doing. They found out he had been secretly negotiating to sell Romano's the whole time he was trying to save it. He had been in talks with a restaurant investment group that specialized in buying struggling businesses, stripping them down, and selling the real estate. Dylan would get a commission on the sale. My parents would get barely enough to cover their debts. My mother showed up at Ember's construction site. I was meeting with the contractor about the final punch list items. She walked in looking smaller than I remembered, tired and defeated. She asked if we could talk. I took her to what would be the dining room, still full of construction equipment and paint tarps. She cried. She apologized. She said they had been wrong about everything. They should have valued what I did. They should have seen Dylan for what he was. They should have trusted me. She said watching Romano's fall apart had been the most painful experience of her life, not because of the money, but because she realized too late that I had been the heart of that place. She told me Dylan was gone. He had actually left town 2 days ago, moved to another state to take some business development job. He cut off contact with them. After everything, after they had chosen him over me repeatedly, he abandoned them without a second thought. The restaurant they had spent 30 years building was going to be sold to pay debts. They were going to lose everything. She asked if I could forgive them. Not forget, just forgive. She said she understood if I could not. She said she just wanted me to know they were sorry, and they were proud of what I was building. Then she hugged me. I stood there stiffly, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to hug her back, to tell her it was okay. Part of me was still angry about everything they had put me through. I told her I needed time. I said I appreciated the apology, but I was not ready to just move past 11 years of being undervalued. She nodded. She understood. She left her phone number on a piece of paper. said to call if I ever wanted to talk. Then she walked out. 2 days before opening, someone broke into Ember. They vandalized the nearly complete kitchen. They destroyed $10,000 worth of equipment and supplies. They poured cooking oil over everything, smashed plates, threw food everywhere. It was targeted, vicious, meant to prevent us from opening on schedule. I called the police immediately. They came, took a report, checked our security cameras. The footage showed a person in dark clothes and a mask. The cameras were not great quality, but you could see their build and movements. One of my staff members recognized the walk. It was someone Dylan had hired at Romano's, a guy with a criminal record who had been fired from 3 other restaurants. The police tracked him down. He admitted Dylan had paid him $500 to do it. The police said there was not enough evidence to arrest Dylan directly. The vandal claimed Dylan just paid him to check out the competition, and he got carried away. It was his word against Dylan's. Dylan denied everything. He was in another state anyway, conveniently far away when the crime happened. The police said I could try to sue Dylan civilly, but criminal charges were not going to happen. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to hunt Dylan down and destroy him the way he had tried to destroy me. But I did not have time for revenge. I had 48 hours to clean up, replace equipment, and still open on schedule. Delaying the opening would be a victory for Dylan. It would prove he could still hurt me. My entire staff showed up without being asked. We worked through the night cleaning, making emergency supply runs, borrowing equipment from other restaurants whose owners supported me. Helen Bradshaw called Richard Hartfield, and he approved emergency funding to replace what was destroyed. By opening night, you could not tell anything had happened, but I could not let it go. The day of opening, I got a lawyer and filed a police report with all the evidence I had. I made it clear I wanted everything documented. If Dylan ever tried anything again, there would be a paper trail showing his pattern of harassment. My mother called, begging me not to press charges, saying it would tear the family apart. I told her the family was already destroyed. Dylan did that. All I was doing was protecting myself. Opening night arrived. I stood in Ember's kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours before service, and felt equal parts terror and determination. Everything was ready. The kitchen gleamed. The dining room looked beautiful. The team was prepared. We had a full house of reservations, but the morning's court hearing hung over everything like a shadow. Dylan had filed for an emergency restraining order against me. He claimed I had threatened him physically, that I was dangerous, that he feared for his safety. It was completely fabricated. I had not spoken to Dylan in months, except through lawyers. But he filed it strategically. The hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning. If I went to court, I would miss crucial prep time for opening. If I did not go, I would lose by default, and there would be a restraining order against me. He set it up so I could not win. I hired an attorney I could not afford. Her name was Margaret Stone, a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in harassment cases. We showed up at court at 9:30. Dylan was there with his own lawyer, looking smug. My parents were there too, looking miserable. They had been subpoenaed by Dylan's lawyer to testify about my erratic behavior. The hearing started at 10. Dylan's lawyer presented his case. He painted me as a jealous, unstable person who had sabotaged the family business and was now harassing Dylan. He brought up the lawsuit Dylan had filed against me, implying I was the aggressor. He showed text messages Dylan had sent me that I never responded to, claiming my silence was threatening. It was absurd, but the lawyer made it sound almost credible. Then Margaret presented our side. She brought the security footage of the vandalism at Ember. She brought the police report, showing Dylan's connection to the person who committed the crime. She brought documentation of every false complaint Dylan had filed against me with the health department. She brought statements from former Romano's employees describing Dylan's smear campaign. She brought evidence of Dylan trying to sell Romano's behind my parents' backs. She destroyed him. The judge was not amused. She asked Dylan directly if he had paid someone to vandalize my restaurant. He denied it. She asked him about the police report. He said it was a misunderstanding. She asked him about filing false health department complaints. He said he was concerned about food safety. She did not believe a word of it. Then she asked my parents to testify. My mother looked at Dylan, then at me. She took the stand and told the truth. She said I had never threatened Dylan. She said Dylan had mismanaged Romano's. She said Dylan had tried to sell the restaurant without their knowledge. She said I had walked away from Romano's peacefully and had every right to open my own restaurant. My father testified the same. Dylan looked betrayed. I felt nothing. The judge denied the restraining order. She said it was clear Dylan was attempting to use the court system to harass me and disrupt my business. She warned Dylan's lawyer that future frivolous filings would result in sanctions. The hearing ended at 11:30. I had lost 90 minutes of prep time, but I had won. I rushed from court to Ember. My team had been holding down the fort, prepping as much as they could without me. I changed into my chef's coat and dove into final preparations. We had 3 hours until first seating. Everything had to be perfect. At 5:30, the first guests arrived. The dining room staff handled them beautifully, professional, and warm. The first orders came into the kitchen. I called out the tickets. My team moved like a machine. First courses went out at exactly the right temperature and presentation. I tasted every dish before it left the kitchen. Nothing went out unless it was perfect. Local press were there. Food bloggers, influencers. Everyone wanted to see if I could actually pull this off. Helen Bradshaw was there with Richard Hartfield and several Hartfield Corporation executives. This was not just a restaurant opening. This was a statement. At 7 o'clock, my parents walked in. They had not made a reservation. The host looked at me questioningly. I had every right to turn them away. Part of me wanted to. But my mother looked at me with such hope and sadness that I nodded. The host seated them at a small table in the corner. At 7:15, Dylan walked in. I saw him through the kitchen window, and my blood went cold. He was not on the reservation list. He walked straight to my parents' table and sat down uninvited. I could see them trying to get him to leave. He ignored them. He picked up a menu and smirked. My sous chef asked if I wanted him to call the police. I said no. I had a better idea. I walked out into the dining room in my full chef's whites. Every conversation in the room stopped. I walked directly to Dylan's table. I looked at him calmly. I said, "You are not welcome here. Please leave." He said he had every right to eat at a public restaurant. I said no. I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, and I am refusing to serve you. You have harassed me, vandalized my business, and tried to destroy my reputation. You are not eating here. Leave now, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Dylan stood up. He looked around the room at everyone watching. He said loudly, "Everyone should know the food here is stolen from Romano's. Everything Elliot does is based on recipes he took from our family. He is a thief and a liar." People stared. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry at Dylan for making a scene. Richard Hartfield stood up from his table. He walked over and stood next to me. He said, "I have eaten at Romano's. I have eaten Elliot's food tonight. They are nothing alike." Romano's served competent Italian-American food. This restaurant serves innovative cuisine that happens to have Italian influences. There is no comparison. Elliot earned everything he has through talent and hard work. You should leave before you embarrass yourself further. Helen Bradshaw stood up too. She said, "Hartfield Corporation conducted thorough due diligence before investing in Ember. We verified that everything Elliot does is original and legal. If you continue to make false accusations, we will add you to the lawsuit we are already preparing for the damages you caused." Other diners started standing up. One man, a local business owner I recognized, said, "I have been a Romano's customer for 20 years. What you did to that restaurant was criminal. Elliot built it and you destroyed it. You have some nerve showing up here." Several other people nodded in agreement. Dylan looked around, realizing he had completely miscalculated. He thought people would turn on me. Instead, they turned on him. My father stood up. He looked at Dylan and said, "Leave. You are not my son anymore. Leave and do not come back." Dylan stared at him, shocked. Then he looked at my mother, expecting her to defend him. She just looked away. Dylan walked out. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole dining room was applauding. I went back to the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath and got back to work. Orders kept coming. Every dish had to be perfect. I could not let Dylan's attempted sabotage ruin opening night. The team could feel the energy. Everyone worked faster, cleaner, more focused. We were not just cooking food. We were proving something. The rest of the night was flawless. Every ticket went out on time. Every dish was exactly right. When the last dessert was plated and sent out at 11, I finally let myself relax. We did it. We opened a restaurant in 4 months. We survived Dylan's sabotage. We proved everyone wrong. My parents waited until the last guests left. They approached me cautiously. My father apologized again. He said he should have believed me about Dylan from the start. He said watching what Dylan became showed him how badly they had failed as parents. My mother said Romano's was closing next week. The bank was foreclosing. They were going to lose everything they had built. I felt bad for them. I did. But I could not fix their problems. I told them I appreciated their apologies and their support tonight. I told them I was not ready to have them back in my life fully, but I was willing to stay in contact. Small steps. They accepted that. They left quietly. I stood in my empty restaurant at midnight, exhausted and exhilarated. Helen came back in from walking Richard to his car. She said Richard was extremely impressed. He wanted to talk to me tomorrow about expanding the partnership. I asked what she meant. She smiled and said we would discuss it in the morning. Then she left. I locked up Ember and drove home, not to the studio apartment, but to the small house I had just rented with my first paycheck as a restaurant owner. It was modest, but it was mine. I fell asleep that night, knowing I had won. Not against Dylan, not against my family, against the part of myself that wanted to give up when everything fell apart. 3 months after opening, Amber was fully booked 6 weeks in advance. Every review was glowing. Food bloggers called it the best new restaurant in Connecticut. The local newspaper ran a feature story about my journey from Romano's to Ember. They portrayed it as a classic American success story, someone who lost everything and rebuilt through determination and talent. I hired more staff as we got busier. We went from 15 employees to 22. Every person I brought on was carefully chosen, not just for their skills but for their character. I remembered what it felt like to work in a toxic environment under Dylan. I was determined that Ember would be different. We had family meal together before every service. We celebrated birthdays and promotions. When someone's kid was sick, they could leave early without worrying about their job. I built the kind of workplace I wished Romano's had been. Revenue exceeded every projection Richard Hartfield's team had made. We were on track to pay back half of the initial investment within the first year. That was almost unheard of in the restaurant industry. Richard called me one morning and asked if I had time for lunch. Not at Ember, at his office. I knew that meant something big. I met him at Hartfield Corporation headquarters. His office was on the top floor, all windows and minimalist furniture. He sat me down and got straight to the point. He said Ember had exceeded all expectations. The food was exceptional, the business model was sound, and I had proven I could handle the pressure of running my own operation. He wanted to expand the partnership. Hartfield Corporation wanted to open 3 more Ember locations over the next 2 years. 1 in New Haven, 1 in Hartford, 1 in Boston. I would own 40% of the entire restaurant group. Hartfield would own 60%, but I would have complete creative control over all locations. They would handle the business side, real estate, financing, legal. I would handle everything related to the food and the customer experience. If all 4 locations were successful, I would be a multimillionaire by the time I was 35. I sat there trying to process it. 3 months ago, I was living in a studio apartment, making $14 an hour. Now I was being offered the chance to build a restaurant empire. I asked for 2 days to think about it. Richard said, of course. He also said something I would never forget. He said he had been watching me carefully since the opening. He said what impressed him most was not my cooking, although that was exceptional. What impressed him was that when Dylan tried to destroy me, I did not waste energy on revenge. I focused on building something better. That was the mark of someone who understood long-term success. I called my sister Emma that night. We had not spoken in months. She answered hesitantly. I told her about the expansion offer. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she was proud of me. She apologized for not believing me about Dylan. She had seen everything that happened, seen how he treated our parents, seen how he destroyed Romano's. She realized I had been telling the truth all along. She asked if we could maybe get coffee sometime. I said yes. Romano's closed officially 2 weeks later. The building was sold to a developer who was turning it into luxury condos. My parents lost everything. They moved into a small rental apartment, living on Social Security and my father's modest pension. They sent me a letter. They did not ask for money or help. They just said they were grateful I was doing well, and they hoped someday I could forgive them. I went to visit them one Sunday afternoon. Their apartment was tiny, nothing like the house they had owned for 30 years. My mother made coffee. We sat in their small living room and talked. Really talked. For the first time in years. They asked about Ember. I told them about the expansion plans. They were genuinely happy for me. My father said he understood now what I had been trying to tell them all along. He said Dylan had the degree, but I had the passion. And in the restaurant business, passion matters more than credentials. I did not offer them money. They did not ask. But I did tell them they could eat at Ember anytime they wanted, on the house. My mother started crying. She said that meant more than I knew. They came twice a month after that, always sitting at the same corner table, always ordering whatever I recommended. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was something. It was enough for now. Dylan disappeared completely. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he was working at some mid-level corporate job in Texas. He deleted all his social media. He cut off contact with everyone from Connecticut. In a way, that was the best possible outcome. He could not hurt anyone anymore. 6 months after opening Ember, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You won. I hope you are happy." It was from Dylan. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about responding with something cutting, something that would hurt him the way he had hurt me. Then I just deleted it. He was not worth the energy. Helen Bradshaw became more than just a client. She became a mentor and a friend. She taught me about the business side of restaurants, about managing growth, about protecting myself legally. She introduced me to people in her network who helped me navigate the expansion. She said she saw something in me from the first time we met, a combination of talent and integrity that was rare in any industry. I accepted Richard's offer. We opened the second Ember location in New Haven 8 months later, the third in Hartford 6 months after that. The Boston location was scheduled for the following year. Each opening was smoother than the last. I built systems, trained managers, developed a team that could replicate the quality and experience without me being physically present at every location. Food magazines started calling. I did a few interviews, always keeping it professional, never mentioning the family drama unless they asked directly. When they did ask, I kept it simple. I said I learned that sometimes you have to walk away from what is comfortable to discover what you are truly capable of creating. People responded to that. I got messages from other people who had family business conflicts, thanking me for being honest about how hard it was. A James Beard Award nomination came through for Best Chef in the Northeast. I did not win, but being nominated at 33 years old was significant. It opened more doors. I got offers to consult for other restaurants, to write a cookbook, to do a cooking show. I turned down most of them. I was focused on building Ember, on proving that what I created was sustainable and not just a flash of luck. I kept thinking about what I learned through everything that happened. I realized that loyalty to people who do not value you is not loyalty at all. It is self-betrayal. For 11 years I told myself that family came first, that I owed my parents for giving me a chance, that blood was thicker than water. All of that was true to a point, but it became an excuse for them to exploit me, and an excuse for me to accept less than I deserved. Walking away from Romano's was the hardest thing I ever did. Every instinct told me to stay, to fix it, to be the good son who sacrificed for the family. But walking away was also the moment I started living for myself, instead of for other people's expectations. I learned that sometimes the only way to build something truly yours is to burn down what came before. I learned that family is not just about blood. My restaurant team became my family. Helen and Richard became my family. The people who believed in me when I had nothing, who supported me when my own relatives turned against me. They were more family than the people I shared DNA with. Family is about who shows up, who values you, who fights for you. Blood just determines who you happen to be related to. Success is not something that gets handed down from one generation to the next. It is something you build yourself, through failure and pain and relentless work. Dylan thought success was a title, a shortcut, something you could fake until you made it. He learned the hard way that success without substance is just an expensive illusion. The greatest revenge is not destroying the people who hurt you. It is building a life so full and successful that they become irrelevant. Dylan tried everything to stop me. He sabotaged, he lied, he sued, he vandalized. None of it mattered, because I was focused on creation while he was focused on destruction. You cannot build anything real when all your energy goes into tearing other people down. I also learned about forgiveness, which is more complicated than people pretend. I forgave my parents, but that did not mean I forgot what they did. I forgave them because carrying anger was exhausting and pointless. But I also set boundaries. I decided what kind of relationship I was willing to have with them, on my terms, not theirs. Forgiveness does not mean letting people hurt you again. It means releasing the past so you can build your future. Now I stand in Ember's kitchen on a busy Saturday night, calling out orders, tasting sauces, watching my team work with precision and passion. This is mine, not inherited, not borrowed, not dependent on anyone's approval. I built this from nothing, after losing everything. Nobody can take it away from me because it exists independent of anyone else's decisions. I still have my grandfather's marinara recipe, the one I perfected at Romano's. I could use it at Ember if I wanted, but I do not. I created new recipes, better recipes, recipes that are entirely mine. That feels right. The past is the past. I took the lessons and left the rest behind. I think about that day 11 years ago when I walked into Romano's for the first time, 21 years old, and desperate to prove myself. If I could go back and tell that kid what was coming, the betrayal and the loss and the pain, I do not know if he would have the courage to keep going. But I also know he would not trade what he built for anything. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the best destinations. I get a text from Helen. Richard wants to meet next week about the Boston location. There are some investors interested in the restaurant group, potentially taking Ember national. I smile. 3 years ago, I was packing my knives and walking away from everything I knew. Now I am building something bigger than I ever imagined. Someone once told me you have to lose everything to discover what you are truly worth. I lost my family, my reputation, my savings, my home. I found out I was worth more than all of that combined. I found out I could build something from nothing. I found out I did not need anyone's permission to be successful. That knowledge is worth more than any inheritance. As I plate the final dessert of the night, I think about Dylan's text. You won. I hope you are happy. The truth is, I did win, but not against him. I won against doubt, against fear, against the voice that said I should stay where it was safe. I won against the idea that family loyalty meant accepting disrespect. I won against the belief that I needed anyone's validation to know my own worth. And yes, Dylan, I am happy. Not because you lost, but because I discovered what I was capable of when I stopped waiting for permission and started building my own future. That is a victory nobody can take away. Here is what I want to ask you. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built because the people around you did not value your contribution? Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to family and loyalty to yourself? How did you find the courage to start over when everything fell apart? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is facing the same impossible choice right now. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own relationships or career or family dynamics, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who rebuilt their lives after losing everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear that walking away is not giving up. It is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. You are capable of more than you know, and sometimes you have to lose everything to discover that truth. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived.